Okay, good evening, everyone. Today we will be continuing our essay writing introduction topic or introduction to essay writing. And we're continuing on the writing process. So last Thursday, we would have talked about some pre-writing techniques. And so today we will discuss how to write your thesis and how to write your essay outlines, which is another pre-writing technique that we would have missed last week. So moving on, we have our word of the day. And our word of the day is decorous. Decorous means marked by propriety and good taste. Correct. A person or thing that is decorous conforms to an approved or conventional standard. And if you would have heard the word decorum, yes, this is a relative of that word. So our example sentence today is, before making her daily announcements, the principal mentioned how proud she was of the students' decorous conduct at the recent school dance. So did you know? One of the earliest recorded uses of decorous appears in a book titled The Rules of Civility, 1673. And from that book, we have a quote, and it says, "It is not decorous to look in the glass, to comb, brush, or do anything of that nature to ourselves whilst the said person be in the room." This rule of thumb may be a bit outdated. Like many behaviors once deemed unbecoming, public primping is unlikely to offend in modern times, meaning fixing your hair, looking in the mirror, etc., as the book would have referred to earlier. So decorous lives go on to describe timeless courtesies, I should say, like polite speech, proper attire, and covering one's cough. So with that being said, we move on to the meat of the matter. So as I said before, we will be focusing on writing your topic sentence/thesis. Your thesis is the central idea of your essay. It should communicate a specific point about your topic and suit the purpose of your assignment. To create a strong thesis, you will need to think critically, develop a viewpoint based on reading course materials, and you need to do some research. So let's talk about the too narrow thesis. A thesis that is overly narrow usually leaves writers scrambling for something to say. Example, hundreds of North Side commuters have to drive their cars south to the city every weekday morning. So with this sentence, there's nothing being argued, there's nothing being said really. If this was supposed to be the thesis of a essay, you'd be wondering, where is the writer going with this essay? So the test of narrow theses is whether they leave the writer with anything to argue or assert. So here's an improved version. Hundreds of North Side commuters have to drive their cars south to the city every weekday morning because public transportation is not available from the suburbs of Atlanta. So in this improved sentence, we can predict what the writer might say in their essay. So they could talk about why the public transportation is not available. They could talk about how this lack of public transportation will affect Atlanta itself, etc., etc. So the, again, test of a narrow thesis is whether it leaves the writer with anything to argue or assert. So as you write and you reread what you write and you reread your thesis, make sure that when you read it, you can tell just by reading it what you are going to argue or talk about in your essay. And if you can't read it or infer what your essay is going to be about just by that one thesis statement alone, then you need to rewrite your thesis. Right. So moving on, we have the too broad thesis. So the overly broad thesis, in contrast, does not choke off your argument. Instead, it overwhelms you with its largeness. Example, the paper will explain the reason wars are fought. Broad theses usually bite off more than they can chew. There is no way for an essay to cover all the reasons wars are fought. The effort at writing a small essay on a large topic can easily cause you to write generalities in your writing. As you frame your thesis, bear in mind that its overriding purpose is to help you focus on a specific point. Oh, I'm just seeing what was written in the chat. Can you hear me now? Let me know. Okay, good. So yes, as I said before, a broad thesis encourages generalities. So when you're writing your essay, you notice that you have certain word limits, 300 words, 500 words. It never passes 500 usually at your stage or at your level. So in order to keep in line the keep in the word limit, I should say, and to make sure that as you write, every single word and every single sentence is needed and necessary and direct. Your thesis cannot be too broad. Example with as with the example on the slide, the paper will explain the reason wars are fought. There's no way an essay can cover every single reason. Now, if the person who had this thesis were to say, this paper will explain 3 reasons wars are fought, and they list those 3 reasons, then we know that, yes, it can be done in 300 words or 500 words, right? So make sure that your thesis is not too broad and not too narrow. So with that being said, how do we refine our thesis? So first, we have to make sure our thesis is suitable. So a suitable thesis fits the paper's or essay's main purpose. And we did talk about purpose in a previous lesson. So all of the things that you could have gathered from lessons so far, knowing your purpose, knowing your audience, knowing which strategies you are going to use, all of this will help you write your thesis as well as use up your pre-writing techniques. So a thesis for an argument will take a clear position on an issue or recommend an action. A thesis for an informative or interpretive essay will often preview the essay's contents or express the writer's insight into the topic. So whatever essay you are writing, persuasive, expository, sequence, problem and solution, compare, contrast, narrative, whichever essay you're writing, make sure that by reading your thesis, your reader can understand what your purpose is and what type of essay you're going to be writing. So with that being said, here are some examples of suitable theses. So they all talk on one main topic, but the purposes are different. So first we have a thesis to inform. So in terms of income wealth, the gap between the rich and the poor has increased substantially during the past decade. So we can predict that this essay will talk about how the gap has increased, why it has increased, etc., etc. So it's to inform. Next, we have a thesis to interpret. And in your English literature essays, you will write many essays to interpret what you would have read in your drama, prose, poetry, whatever else you are reading. So a thesis for interpretation is: the economic ideas George Will expresses in Healthy Inequality are politically conservative. And we know this essay will answer the question to why it is politically conservative, and it will outline those reasons. And lastly, we have a thesis to argue. So debate writing, persuasive writing, all of these, they have a specific way of writing in terms of style that will allow your reader or your listener to know that, yes, you are here to argue. So the example we have here is: George Will is wrong about economic inequality being good for the country. And of course, in this essay, the person will explain why his stance is so wrong. So make sure your thesis is suitable for whatever type of essay you are writing. Are we getting along so far? Okay, good. So next, we have to make sure our theses are specific. So vague theses usually lead to weak, unfocused essays. Watch out for thesis statements that simply announce your topic, state an obvious fact about it, or offer a general observation. A specific thesis signals a focused, well-developed paper or essay. Remember, a thesis statement can be more than one sentence to provide a framework for your main idea. Okay, take care. Yeah, take care. I'll see you next time. Right. So remember, a thesis statement can be more than one sentence to provide a main framework for your main idea. All the sentences, when taken together, should build to one specific point that fits the purpose of your assignment. And so we have some examples of such unspecific theses, which of course signals a underdeveloped essay. So first one, it says, make sure that you avoid a thesis that simply makes an announcement. So I will discuss the article Healthy Inequality by George Will. First off, we don't know what the writer's point of view about the article is. They're just announcing that they will discuss, but what exactly are they discussing? There's no way to tell with this thesis statement. So next one, avoid a statement of fact. The article Healthy Inequality by George Will is about the gap between the rich and the poor. By just reading the what do you call that? The introduction of the article, people will obviously know that this is about the gap between the rich and the poor. So this cannot be a thesis statement, and it doesn't make a specific point about the article. And lastly, we have avoiding general observation. George Will's article Healthy Inequality is well written and provocative. So while this thesis makes a point about the article, this point could apply to many other articles. What makes this article worth reading? So these are just some examples of how your thesis can be unspecific. So if your thesis looks anything similar to this, and when you ask the relevant questions, is it making a specific point? What is the viewpoint behind this thesis, etc., etc., then you know that you have to refine and revise your thesis statement. So a specific thesis could read: George Will's argument that economic equality is healthy for the United States should not be accepted. His interpretation of the recent increase in income inequality is questionable. His reasoning about history is flawed, and above all, his idea of what is healthy is too narrow. So in this series of sentences, a specific point is made, right? And we know that the person will, they will develop the 3 points that they showed in this short introduction. So they'll discuss why his interpretation of the recent increase in income inequality is questionable, I should say. They're going to discuss why his reasoning about history is flawed, and they're going to discuss what his idea of what is healthy. Why his idea of what is healthy is too narrow. So make sure that as you write, especially in your introduction, that your readers know what you're going to discuss, know what specific point you have, know what your view on your topic is, and above all, that what you write is specific. And with that, we move on to making sure your thesis is significant. A significant thesis asserts something that could possibly make a difference in what the readers know, understand, or believe. Chances are what makes a difference to you can also make a difference to your readers. When you are looking for possible theses, make sure to challenge yourself to develop one that you care about, right? Can be hard at times, but try to touch on a topic that you yourself you have strong feelings toward, or that you can back up with enough evidence and facts. Next, we have a summary of guidelines for writing theses. We can propose 6 guidelines for writing good thesis statements. Predict the content of your essay as specifically as possible without wasting words. And for this first guideline, writing your outline will help you with predicting the content of your essay. 2, be clear and coherent. 3, be stated in one complete sentence, if possible. 4, be free from figures of speech. 5, be a statement, not a question. 6, move toward a single point. Don't diverge into 2 or more ideas. So if you are presenting one viewpoint on a topic, you cannot be presenting information that agrees with an opposing side unless you're going to have some sort of counterattack, or make sure that you don't have information that doesn't add to the topic any at all. Because by doing this, you're lessening your word count and you're wasting time. So make sure that you stay on one single topic. And with that, we move on to writing essay outlines. So, use of outlines. An outline is a map of what you will cover in your essay. It should help you know whether you are developing your main idea logically and should outline the supporting points you need. The most important function of the outline is to prevent your essay from dwelling on some topics while failing to develop others or straying to irrelevant topics. Again, it wastes your word count and it also wastes time. So sometimes writing an outline of a finished essay can show issues in development, parallelism, and weak points that you might have missed in the heat of writing. So let's talk about informal outlines. Your outline does not have to be formal unless your teacher requires it to be, and may be an informal sketch of your essay. Here you write what you intend to say in your essay with a sequence of the points you need to cover. While how you create your outline is up to you, a few examples of organization can help give you, they should be ideas for how to plan your outline. These include scratch outlines, do-say plans, numbering systems, jot lists, diagram outlines. So we're going into each type of outline. So first we have the scratch outline. So a scratch outline is a simple list of points without major subdivisions in more complex outlines. They are useful in brief papers and simple essays. So we have our thesis. Schools should make adequate provisions for disabled students in all classes. So we have supporting point 1. It increases the disabled students' comfort. How does it benefit the learning experience? How does it help them enjoy their experience at school? So these would be the subdivisions of the main point. And as you can see, these are questions, so they can guide the writer in how they will write their essay. Point 2, encourages understanding among other students. How does it teach other students about equal opportunities for all? Students have opportunities to help disabled students. Protects disabled students from harm and or accidents. Advantage of proper facilities and provisions for mobility prevents bullying of the disabled students. So as you can see with an informal outline, I should say, it doesn't have one set structure. So some of the points are written in sentences, some are statements, some are phrases, and it is just up to you to choose how you're going to write down your points and how they will help you in making sure your points are well developed and that you have as much specific information and detailed information as possible. So now we move on to the do-say plan. A do-say plan is a more detailed type of informal outline. Review your notes and other relevant material before you write such a plan. Write down your main idea / thesis and list what you will say under each of the following do categories: introduce, support and develop, and conclude. So here we have a prompt. Write an essay on the issue of the use of excessive and unnecessary force by members of the constabulary force or police officers. Right. Introduce the issue and my focus. Say what police officers are expected to do: protect citizens, maintain peace, outline the growth of police brutality cases in recent years, use statistics, talk about the response of the media and public at large to these cases, introduce 3 reasons police officers use excessive force. Support and develop thesis on why police use excessive force and solutions to problem. So speak on police using their occupation to exact revenge, outline the problems this causes, explain the effect of prejudice and bias, racism, homophobia, xenophobia, etc. on police activity. Use statistics to show how likely certain groups are to be targeted by police. Bring up the issue of pride and abuse of power, the deceptiveness of corruption, and show how lack of justice in the police system causes people to resort to jungle justice, aggressiveness, lack of trust in the system, and increases in protest, I should say. Conclude with solutions to problems, thesis causes, installing cameras, intense background checks, social conflict and problem-solving training, strict punishments for unnecessary force, how solutions to problems can bring about better community togetherness and encourage overall justice and fairness. So as you can see, do-say plans are also helpful in writing argumentative speeches or other oral presentations. And as you prepare your oral presentations for your English SPA, for those of you who have not finished yet, this plan can help you with your presentation, if you're doing a speech, that is. Next, we have numbering systems. My two closest friends, John and Mark, are nearly exact opposites in their handling of money. So this is a compare and contrast essay. So it seems like the writer is comparing the two subjects, John and Mark, according to certain points. So our first point is attitude toward money. John has contempt for money, Mark has reverence for money. Second point, willingness to spend money. John spends without hesitation, Mark comparison shops. Sorry. And lastly, we have items to be bought. John buys what he wants, Mark buys what he can afford. So you will also notice that with different types of essays, you might have different formats for your informal outlines. That is fine and good. Remember that these are just to help you in organizing your own outline. All right, so next we have the jot list outline. So this is a list on which you jot down your main points with some notes of supporting details. They can be neat, messy, or scribbled. Our thesis is a stroke affects the victim, the victim's family, and the long-range plans of the victim and the family. So you have effects of a stroke. Physical effects on victim, we have the subdivisions. Effects on the family, more subdivisions. Effects on long-range plans, more subdivisions. So this is the example of the jot list outline. And our last informal outline is the diagram outline. So in a diagram outline, every rectangle represents a single paragraph, and the arrow shows the linkages between them. So our topic sentence, there are 4 types of students found in US middle schools. First type would be punks, describe how they dress and behave. Second type, members of the popular crowd or preppies, describe how they dress and behave. Third type, heavy metal fans, describe how they dress and behave. And lastly, fourth type, social outcasts or geeks. And you will see a lot of diagram outlines. Your teacher might have introduced them to you, but they are one of the most common informal outlines, I should say. And so we move from the informal to the formal. So formal outlines subdivide the main idea of your essay into smaller ideas, which are to be developed in separate paragraphs. The accepted form of outline uses Roman numerals, capital letters, and Arabic numerals to order ideas according to their importance. And under that, we have an example of a 3-point formal outline. So we have the main idea thesis will be the first in the outline. Then we have the subordinate idea with the Roman numerals. Then we have the capital letters after that with the supporting idea or evidence. And after that, we have the Arabic numerals with the subdivision of supporting evidence. One moment. Right. So more complex essays use 4-point formal outlines that explore minor ideas under the subdivisions of supporting evidence. So under the Arabic numerals in a 4-point formal outline, they would use common letters. So common A, common B after the 1 and 2, right? So apart from that, we have topic outlines and sentence outlines under informal outlines. So the entries in a topic outline consist of single words or phrases. So here we have in our thesis, in my years of driving, I have become aware of 3 types of drivers who tend to create havoc on the road, and I've learned to keep guard against them. So we have irresponsible drivers, they are unaccountable to other drivers, dangerous to other drivers. Defense, keep a distance. Stubborn drivers, determined, unsafe. Defense, don't argue. Absent-minded drivers, heedless of surroundings, unaware of their driving. Defense, be ready to use horn. So it's sentence outlines now. They consist of full sentences. So irresponsible drivers refuse to be accountable for the welfare of others. They speed through school zones. They change lanes needlessly. I've learned to keep a safe distance. Stubborn drivers insist on having their own way. They drive in the left-hand lane, forcing others to pass right. They drive slowly, not allowing others to pass. I don't try to argue with stubborn drivers. And lastly, we have absent-minded drivers are heedless of their surroundings and do not have their minds on what they are doing. So they are oblivious to other cars. They do not use turn signals. They change lanes, ignoring other cars. I try to be ready to alert them by honking my horn. So as you can see, both of these outlines, they would be examples of formal outlines. And most times you will need to write a formal outline when your teacher asks for an outline. That's mostly when it is used. If you're going to submit it along with your paper, make sure that it is formal if your teacher wants it to be formal. Because I'm sure there's some teachers who would want to see your first draft, your pre-writing techniques, etc., etc. But if it's asked to be formal, this is the format that you will use. So first, Roman numerals, capital letters, and then Arabic numerals, which is just the 1, 2, 3 here. So keep this in mind. So with that being said, before we close, we're going to look through our assignment. Let me share the screen. Right. So I'm just gonna go through this, right? So this is our essay outline assignment. I wanted you guys to try it first to see if you understand how to develop your point or choose your points correctly, right? So the instructions, rewrite the following outlines, correcting any defects. First, we have a desktop computer is less expensive, more powerful, and more flexible than a laptop computer. So our first supporting point, our subordinate point, a desktop computer is less expensive than a laptop, which is it's stated in the thesis. So that part is good. Next, a desktop computer is often half the price of an equivalent laptop. Good. Laptop computers charge a premium for portability. So while this point is fine as it stands, it can also serve as evidence of the previous point. It answers the question of why laptops are more expensive than desktops. So here I put an additional point that can be used instead of B. Desktops are, for the most part, easier and less expensive to repair. So next, this point here, we take it out. It doesn't develop or support the thesis. Instead, it shifts the argument to be favorable towards laptop computers. So we move on to the third subordinate point. Desktop computers are more powerful than laptops. Generally, desktop computers are made to use the fastest chips. The next point says laptop computers are not made to use the fastest chip. This point merely restates the previous point in a different format. If desktop computers are made to use the fastest chips, then laptops can't be made to use the fastest chips. So make sure you write down these points so you know that you don't restate your point, use irrelevant points, etc., etc. And then we have, unlike laptops, desktop computers can be used for long hours without issues. So this would be the point that I inserted to replace point B. Right. So the last point we have is, well, subordinate point, I should say. Desktop computers are more flexible than laptops. So A, Desktop computers are highly upgradable. B says laptop computers can only be upgraded in limited ways. This point modifies the previous one, doesn't need to be there. And C, desktop computers can have more added hardware than laptops, making them more customizable. Right, so that would be the point that I added to point 4. So as you write your outlines, make sure that you don't restate points. Make sure that you don't add a point that can easily be a modifier for another point. And make sure again that you don't have any irrelevant points, because you're wasting time and wasting your words. So you have to be smart about your planning, right? So number 2, the art of reading faster requires a student to read actively, avoid regressions, and be flexible in adjusting the reading pace for material of varying difficulty. Point 1, active reading is necessary to increase reading speed. Active reading requires a preview of the passage. That's good. Active reading is emotional reading, irrelevant to supporting point. You don't even add to the main idea either, so we take it out. C, active reading involves both interpreting and analyzing what you read. So that would be the point that I inserted to replace the crossed out one. Next, regression must be avoided. So the 2 points that would have been under this, the 2 subdivisions, I should say, that were under this point were regression or rereading of material shows a lack of confidence, and regression can be minimized by reading at a higher speed than usual. None of these are relevant to the thesis, or, well, the second one is neither relevant to the thesis nor the supporting point. And then the first one, which would be A, is irrelevant to the thesis. So it does say, yes, regression must be avoided, but does it go in line with the thesis? So you have to remember that. Your thesis is the whole main, it contains the main idea, I should say, of your entire essay. So yes, your point might make sense to your subordinate point, but does it support your thesis? Remember that. So the 2 points I would have added are regression or rereading wastes time. Regression does not guarantee that you understand what you read. So next, this point, completely irrelevant to the thesis, says some books are more fun to read than others. We don't really care about that in this essay. And lastly, we have reading pace must be adjusted for the particular material. So material like Shakespeare and poetry cannot be speed read. Right, so that point is good. I added material like, so it can be more specific. And then next we have technical material also requires a slower pace. So material that deals with a certain topic, so science books with technical terms, books on aviation, etc., those also require a slower pace, especially if you need certain information for your exams and whatever, right? So keep that in mind. And lastly, in our second section, we have write an outline for the main idea. Ensure that you have 2 supporting ideas and at least 2 pieces of evidence/explanations that support those ideas. You can list your ideas in topics or sentences. So the main idea that you were to write your outline on was 2 primary problems confronting adolescents are extreme dependence on family and the search for personal identity. And here we have a little example, and we did talk about examples already in the core points. So I'm still going to leave this section out because I want to see how you write your outlines. So if you want to show me your outlines, you can email them to me or add them on the Google Classroom. You can submit them there. So the two supporting points were already stated in the thesis. It is your task to find subdivisions of the points for your outline. Remember that the points in your formal outline must follow the order of Roman numerals, capital letters, and Arabic numerals if minor ideas are attached to your subdivisions. So yeah, I'm gonna still leave it out for you to attempt. You can again use either topic or sentence format of the formal outline. So that's all for today. Thank you again for listening. And next week, Thursday, we will go into developing your paragraphs in your essay writing. So make sure that you are there for that next week. Thank you again for coming. And I'll see you next week, Tuesday, for our grammar and mechanics session.